Good evening and welcome to another episode of the Vigilate Dialogue. I am your host, Shaina Smith, welcoming you to the National Boardroom. I want to pause here and explain the name of the show. I had a very interesting question the other day, Stacy, in terms of what vigilante means. And I realized that I take it for granted that everybody knows, first of all, that this is the national motto of our country and that it is Latin for the phrase to be watchful. So one of the things that I did, and it was about 10 years ago, just over 10 years ago, I started this show. I found that it was important for us to start to pay attention. And basically, the English translation now is be vigilant about what's happening in our community. And that's the focus of this platform. So with that in mind, we always talking politics because politics is life, and it covers health, education, physical infrastructure, the environment. Everything goes back to what the true essence of politics is supposed to be, and that's decision making on behalf of the national population. So yes. So just for those who may not have known or may have heard it but don't recall what it meant, vigilante is the national motto of the Virgin Islands, and this is the National Boardroom where we talk it all. So, with me tonight, our topic is going to be about our youth. And I think I have the perfect person to guide us in that conversation in terms of what we hear a lot of phrases like youth empowerment and youth development, but we need to unpack all of that tonight, Stacey, and really get to the crux of the matter because I think they're getting lost in the shuffle, so to speak. So, without any further ado, I introduce my guest tonight, the Stacy Buddha Mehta. He is an educator, first and foremost, at heart, and most people know him as the Youth Empowerment Program Director. Welcome, Stacy.
Welcome, Shayna. Thank you. Good night.
All righty. So let's get into it. First, starting off with telling our viewers who may not, by some chance, know exactly who you are.
Who is Stacy? I am, as you said, an educator by heart. I was educated by the BVI government. I like to say that.
Mhm.
Um, and I returned to the territory after doing my bachelor's degree in education, and then I subsequently did a master's degree in education as well. I worked in the education system for about 10 years, and then I left and got into youth development. I am Virgin Islands minded. My mentality is Caribbean and Virgin Islands. I have a love for seeing people excel. I like to see problems being solved. I like to see evolution, individuality, and the ability to express yourself is also very important for me. I think we as an older generation now have a responsibility to guide those who are coming up, not just because, for them to have a better life, but also for us as we age to be able to survive what happens in this world. And I think those are generally what I believe in. Um, I believe in our environment. I have a strong love for art, the environment, and culture.
Mhm. All right. So you're a patriot. You could sum all of that up.
Well, Sheena, I think the word patriot has been thrown around lately, and I don't
Mhm.
agree with the way in which it was thrown around. I think a patriot, it looks at, yes, the bigger picture, but it also, a person would look at what are the values of the community. When you become aloft from what your people are or who your people are, where you came from, it has
Mhm.
nothing to do with, how long you've lived in a country. It has to do with how in tune you are with what it means to be a citizen that is in love with a country.
Mhm.
I think sometimes people's selfish desires interplay into what they want to call themselves or their actions as patriotic.
Okay. Okay. That's a topic for another show then. So we'll do that. Okay, so youth development. You sent me some points and in terms of again unpacking all of this and really when we talk about the youth, who are we referring to? Because sometimes people use ages and categories or you hear millennials. I think I'm part of Gen Z still. Gen Y, there was not Gen Z, it was Gen X. Lord have
Mhm.
mercy. I'm in my 40s, so I'm Gen X. And then there was Gen Y, Gen Z, the millennials, and it's going on. So when
Yeah.
we talk about the youth, who are we referring to?
So that definition by BVI definition or youth policy, national youth policy defines a youth as someone between the ages of 15 and 29. United Nations goes from, I think it's 14 to 25. UNICEF goes from childhood to basically, I think it's 18, 21, 25. Different
Mm-hmm.
countries throughout the world define it in different age ranges.
Okay.
Some people define it based on the needs of a group, that demographic and their needs, what they would need at a given period in time.
Okay.
For me, I personally see youth, and I wish we would adapt this definition as from birth to 25 years old. I think
Okay.
at that point in time, a person needs guidance. When you hit your mid 20s, I think you are starting to figure out what life is about. But
Mm-hmm.
I think for us as a territory, as a nation, to define youth as being 15, we're forgetting those numbers below, and
Mm-hmm.
that is something I do object to.
Yeah. And I'm sure as an educator, you can tell us that, they say by 7, you have your personality already formed. So waiting that late to try to impress upon them, especially when we talk about certain life skills, we're kind of very much behind the eight ball on that.
I
Yeah.
agree. I mean, we've adapted the Commonwealth definition, and I find sometimes in the BVI we like to say that we want to follow our own, or we want to walk to our own beat. But we're
Mm-hmm.
very good at following. We're very good at saying, look at what that country does, or look at what this country does. And we do have the freedom to have our own definitions of a youth.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's definitely something we need to look at. And is the youth policy passed? Is it in legislation or is it still a draft?
So we have a national youth policy. It came in effect in 2014, and it was from 2014 for a 5-year period until 2019.
Okay.
I've been told that it's under review to be done. It's 2 years behind right now. Um, and hopefully it will get done. It outlines the rights of a child, what is expected as a youth, what is expected in terms of opportunities for a youth, and different elements, quality of life, education,
Mm-hmm.
access to health, access to different things. And that's where I take the objection to it, that it should not be for 15 to 29.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Because all of those needs are even before then. Okay.
agreed.
Definitely. Okay. We're going to get our hands on that and we're going to rewrite it and put it out in the public domain again, for the public, because this is something I believe needs to have public consultation as with anything else, to make sure that, again, the people that we are writing policy for have a say in
That
what goes into these policies.
that active involvement of youth. I mean, we buzzword youth empowerment, we buzzword youth development, but
Hmm.
that trail to actually having that active participation,
Yeah.
it's more than just putting a young person on a committee. It's more than just saying that this is your youth speaker. It's about
Hmm.
actually
Hmm.
making sure that you have the views of those youth or that demographic, and they're actually collected. There's evidence, there's research as to what youth in the BVI actually want, versus people just offering their opinion.
Yeah, and that's key. So we're gonna touch on that tonight too. But let's start with the first point that you sent me, and I kind of boil it down to ageism. People hear about sexism, they hear about racism, and I think you're talking about ageism. But you're gonna explain for us exactly what you mean when we're talking about a slow or absence of generational change. What exactly is the problem that you see that needs
So,
to be addressed?
Shayna, I think at the age of 26, I like to tell this story. I had a desire to be a principal in the territory. And when I wrote and thought, I'm interested, I expressed my interest in being a principal in the BVI. I was told that I was too young.
Mm-hmm.
And my response was, throughout the world, principals are generally ages 26, 27, that kind of age.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, I've heard persons say that young people need to know when to say what they have to say, when to do what they have to say. And I remember growing up in the BVI, I was told, wait my turn,
Mm-hmm.
wait my turn.
Me too. I heard it.
Um, I think where things are right now, if we block a generation from doing what they need to do because of what was done to us, then
Mm-hmm.
there's an issue. I think it was on a local show. I think it was Cut Deep. Mention was made of H. Lavity Stout. And For those who do not know, or chief minister, who's probably the most celebrated person in the BVI where leadership and politics is. I think it was 27, 28 that he actually got into politics
Mm-hmm.
and leadership. If he was able to lead a country at the age of 28, 29, why was I not ready to lead a school?
Mm-hmm.
So when I see things like this and I realize that I hear young people now, I'm in my 40s as well, saying, why can't I get a chance? You
Mm-hmm.
know, I went away to school, I got a degree, I came back, I'm trying to inject new ideas, do new things. And that ageism is there. And I mean, it's not just for youth. I've seen it with my dad when I go around publicly with him. People be like, why is he, at this age out doing this and doing that? But,
Oh wow.
it,
Mm-hmm.
it has to happen. We don't stop living.
No.
But as gatekeepers, which is a term people like to throw around, you can't
Mm-hmm.
block a young person. You shouldn't block a young person
Yeah.
from going ahead. I'm big on stories. I remember one day applying for a job at HLSCC, and I sat there with one of my former high school teachers, and he said to me, Stacy, if they offer me the job, I'm not going to take it. I'm going to let you get it. As far as I recall, they offered me the job and not
Mm-hmm.
him. Now, I respected what he said to me because he wasn't going to stand in the way of a young person. And those are words that we generally utter, but we never
Mm-hmm.
actually put any action behind it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think young people in the BVI, based on my interactions, they're tired of sitting and waiting. They're tired of the older heads saying to them, it's not your time. Keep working hard and you'll get there.
You're not ready yet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But you're
Yeah.
you're ready when I need you to be ready to say something or do something. Or if I tell you travel in that direction, there's always restrictions
Mm-hmm.
and conditions on when
Mm-hmm.
our youth are ready to lead, or when our youth are ready to step up, or when they are professional enough
Mm-hmm.
to be taken seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, and I can definitely relate to what you're sharing because again, came home from college in 2003, went to work in the public service, and they told us in high school that you are the leaders of tomorrow. So this is 5 years later from graduating from high school, and you're thinking, no, not even five. That was like 10 years later because I stayed and worked in the US for a bit, got work experience and then came home. I mean, the first disappointment was the paycheck because, again, this is one of the things that we have watched over the years where it's as if we don't value our own. So, on top of the age, possibly being a female, and then it comes to whether or not you should be earning this amount of money. And I'm like,
Mhm.
this is not about what you think I deserve. This is about what value I bring to this organization. Because last I checked, that's why I went away to school. Otherwise, so that is like saying, you know, just do away with all of this. Let's just go straight from high school into the system and be done with it. Because a lot of people, and again, that's probably a topic for another show. It sets people back in terms of their progress socially because their income starts off so low. So you're basically living paycheck to paycheck, or you have to get a second job and live paycheck to paycheck, which makes absolutely no sense. But it's the same story. It's like, so my next step would have been in my career to be a department head. But again, because persons don't think you're ready, or you've done enough time, so to speak, in the system, you're not given the opportunity, or you're given opportunity and then you're set to act for 5 years, and this type of a ludicrousy we see going on. And I'm like, yeah, we really have to start to push back against this, because I don't can't say for certain what happened with the generation before us, as far as like you're saying, they're behaving as a gatekeeper more than a usher. And I often liken it, it's a relay. You run your leg, and after we hit the transition zone, it's time to hand off. And you then basically stay on the track and cheer on the rest of us as we continue to go along. And then we will have a time when we have to hand off and move forward. So I know for the public service, one of the big things that I used to lobby for as the Civil Service Association president was about succession planning. And nationally, we need to think like that as well.
Well, I think I agree with you. Succession planning is important. Communication in terms of telling young people what is expected of them. You
Mm-hmm.
get a government scholarship, or you have the opportunity to go away to tertiary education, or you do your tertiary education here, and then you come out, and what is expected of you? Is it just to total line? Is it just to be a factory worker? What is expected of you? And I find that, families have expectations of their children, but nationally, what do we have as expectations of our young people?
Mm-hmm.
What do we want for them? How important is education? How important is the activities that we engage them in? Again, it comes down to, you're allowed to do this, but you're not allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Um, I faced a lot of, I don't have a local last name. My name is Lather,
Mm-hmm.
and you would have to, in this country, you either have to build your reputation based on your actions, or you build your reputation based on your lineage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you would
Yeah,
see,
that's truth. Mm-hmm.
yeah, persons would be like, I don't have to work too hard because that's my last name. And it's not just indigenous BVI landers, the people who migrate here, and they've established their names, and they adapt a mentality that might be similar to that. But again, I say, as a nation, what do we expect from our young people? Do
Yeah.
we want to see them engaged? Do we want to see them doing well, or we just don't want to see them doing as well as we are,
Yeah.
or as well as the other generation do?
What's your thoughts in terms of why I guess it's undervalued? I don't know. For the same level. Let's keep it in a professional setting.
Hmm.
So, we're applying for a job, and it's you, me, and somebody maybe from the US that
Hmm.
apply for the same job. And somehow there seems to be a preference. Even though we say Virgin Island not be preferred, Belongos preferred, somehow it goes elsewhere, and we're more inclined to incentivize them, so and relocate them, pay for all of this stuff. But if you and I apply for this job, say we want to come home and build our country, like you alluded to earlier, we have the hoops and hurdles to jump over, and can't find a place anywhere to get to fit in. So where does that come from? Why do we? Where does that mindset come from? I'm going to leave it there.
I have no general idea as to where the mindset comes from, because I don't subscribe to it.
Mm-hmm.
I would have to speculate, and I don't want to do that. But I would say this: it is easier for us to take a stand and say that we believe in our people, and we're going to give our people the opportunity. And words without actions are meaningless. But a person who's driven to build a country or get involved in a job and give what they have to give, you have to give consideration. You should give consideration to that person.
Yeah.
I'm not against importing labor. I'm not against in giving people who have experience, more experience than another candidate, a job. But you also have to consider, if you're coming here and you're doing the job, that's good. You may leave, you may not leave. If there's someone who's already here that can get the job done, is there room for capacity building for that person? If you've
Mm-hmm.
invested, that person was invested in by the community taxpayer dollars, why are you not giving them the chance? Why are you not giving them the opportunity? And I
Yeah.
think I may be incorrect. I think, like I said earlier, some of us, if you're from Weston, if you're from Longlow, maybe, that's not what is expected of you. It's
Mm-hmm.
not what they see you becoming, because just
Of
it's
some
basically,
trend, yeah, or some stereotype,
well,
basically.
I've heard the crab in a barrel mentality being thrown around a lot, right? And
Uh-huh.
for me, if we're crabs in a barrel and you're trying to get out, when you guys put us back, or when we're put back in the barrel, or we put people back in the barrel, if we're stacking them at the bottom of the barrel, they won't get out.
Mm-hmm.
If you want us to get out, or you want young people to get out of the barrel, start putting them at the top of the barrel. Stop
Mm-hmm.
stacking everything against them
Yeah.
or against us.
Yeah.
Then we'll be able to climb out. I'm still considering myself to be a youth. I can't get it out my head.
I know, right? Time just went by, but it seems we still here. But yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. So the question now is, how do we address this? How do we fix that type of um? Because it's almost as if this is all around a mindset. But you alluded to it in terms of there are certain actions that need to be taken in terms of saying making room for young people to start to transition into basically being the leaders of today, because tomorrow is here, essentially. This is how I like to describe it. How do we address it?
I think engagement beyond words. When we look at policies in the BVI, when we look at or socialization in the BVI, when are we and how are we engaging young people? I recall growing up in the BVI, I used to love to say there's nothing for young people to do.
Mm-hmm.
25 years later, 30 years later, Shayna, young people are saying the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And our generation might say, well, there are things for them to do. They need to do this, they need to do that. How have we evolved to provide opportunities for young people to get involved? When we engage them, are we actually getting what they're saying? And I said this earlier, do we have evidence, research? Are we asking them to do research on what they want to be involved in? Have we looked
Mm-hmm.
at, or we have the Hotel and Commerce Association. We talk about employment. How are they looking at job trends with our young
Mm-hmm.
people? Where are they going? Which direction do they want to be in?
Yeah.
Are we providing the avenues for them to get that academic and professional development that they want? Do they feel
Mm-hmm.
that their voices are being heard? We have a constitutional review. How was it targeted towards young people? You know, how are we engaging them in them understanding politics in our society, their place in our society, knowing that their voice would be heard, should be heard? How are we really engaging them and saying, you know what? I had a conversation besides a parable. What was the real conversation you had with a young person? And I think for me, the most critical thing is growing up in a country as a young person, right? As you mature, most of the time the issues that you face are no different when you become their age or they become your age.
Mm-hmm.
Employment, security, land
Mm-hmm.
ownership, those are the same things that young people are still concerned about. And how have we engaged them or created policies to help them?
Yeah.
When you look at in the BVI, we have a huge problem with NHI and health. Where are the programs in the school that target children that are overweight?
Mm-hmm.
Where are the healthy programs to target them? How have we evolved our physical education programs to move beyond the typical sports?
Yeah.
When we look at our academic programs in the schools, our teachers are crying out for a reason. They're our largest education base. What are their voices? How do they feel about a junior high school? How do they feel about the curriculum?
Mm-hmm.
I feel that we skate around a lot of issues that we need to hit head on. There was a gentleman yesterday who was visiting here, and he said to me, growing up, he was dyslexic. He's in his 30s. I'm assuming he looks young. And his son, who's 9, 10 years old, is also dyslexic. The system wasn't able to take care of him when he was that age 20 years ago. However, we evolved.
Mm-hmm.
I'm big on empirical data and research, qualitative analysis, and quantitative analysis. I
Mm-hmm.
was shocked a couple months ago when I found out that the BVI hasn't had an educational review since 2001. That's 20 years.
Yeah.
And I listened attentively to how we plan finance for infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
We can build the schools, but if the curriculum in the schools is not achieving what we want nationally,
Yeah.
that money is not well spent.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's appalling to me that we haven't looked at our curriculum. We haven't looked at our standards. We haven't looked at our infrastructure. We haven't looked at our teacher base or administrators, the way we request money, the way money is spent in education for nearly 2 decades.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then how can we nationally make decisions about youth and education?
Yeah. And that is such a key thing because you and I know my mother was a teacher. And you and I know that education is the foundation of the country. That's where the country is built, really, because it's the people. And if we are basically neglecting, as it were, the education system, that we're not going to get an investment, a return on the investment, because we require education for, is it 12 years?
Mm-hmm.
That's mandatory. We want to know that at the end of it, that we're gonna get a return, be intangible, but these are the people that are going to have to carry the country forward and basically do the same thing for the next generation that comes, and that's what sustainability looks like. But that's an important point you brought up there, because even just from a policy standpoint, one of the things that need to be addressed every 10 years, it should just be a rule. We need to pull out the curriculum and say what's working, what's not working, what do we need to improve on, what do we need to add, and do it. Not wait till it's crumbling and falling apart and not readable to say, we need to look at our curriculum and see what needs to happen.
I
You
agree with
know.
you. I also feel that, we shouldn't be saying that we are what we're not.
Hmm.
Test results are important, but at the same time, we need to look at where we're failing and how we can strengthen those things, and where we're
Yeah.
strong and how we can make them even stronger.
Hmm.
Um, Strategic planning is necessary for young people. Where do you want the average youth in the Virgin Islands to be, between what should they have achieved, or what can we help them achieve between the ages of birth
Yeah.
and that 25 or that 29-year-old bracket.
Hmm.
Cost of living is affecting us as middle-aged people. I guess I can say middle-aged. How is it affecting a younger person right now who's just out of high school,
Hmm.
barely making 24,000 a year? How are they able to buy food? How are they
Hmm.
able to pay enormous internet bills? How are they able to deal with gas prices right now?
Yeah.
I'm not hearing that. How is our policies affecting our young people, well, our citizens on a whole, with
Yeah.
day-to-day living? It is stressful trying to live in an environment or country where you care about the country, but it's
Hmm.
difficult just to exist in a country. But these are
Yeah.
not the conversations I'm having or I'm hearing. But I am hearing young people. One young man said to me, Mayfair, I don't know about government. I don't care about government. They don't do anything for me. I didn't graduate from high school. I just have to work this basic job. I
Hmm.
mean, I've seen young people in the BVI who become addicted to alcohol, to hardcore drugs. Where's the rehabilitation for our youth?
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
have a lot of policies here and policies there, but we're patching. We're
Yeah.
patching things at different points. And we love to highlight the positive in the BVI.
Yeah.
We absolutely do. And there is a lot of positive. There is a lot of positive.
Yeah.
But, you know,
Priorities is the key thing. Eh?
mhm,
Priorities. Yeah. Yeah, I can relate to that because I was talking to a young man that I know went to high school with us. He was younger than us, and he's basically strung out. And somewhere along in the conversation, I was like, "Yeah, I'm trying to understand what happened. What happened with you?" But like you said, it's like if for nothing else, I want to see us start to take mental health, drug rehabilitation as a priority. We can't just accept it and say, "Oh well, that one got away from us." So we just let them continue to coexist. I know there are some programs in place in terms of, there some level of help is supposedly there, but
mhm.
again, it has to be a high priority. The same thing with like we're saying with the education system, it has to be a higher priority in terms of the whole overall scheme because it is the foundation of how we are building our country. Because if we don't have things in our school system, like for me, I'm always, I was actually reworking the social studies curriculum today, and I told somebody, I said, the things I am now finding out about my history and heritage, I feel disenfranchised, and I don't want to see a generation come up after me and saying they don't know about the 1949 march, they don't know who Glanville Fonseca is. They don't know who the first members of the 1950 Legislative Council was after it was restored. We basically had that dark ages, I would call it, for
Mhm.
about 49 years because 1901 to 1949 is when we lost the Constitution and then it came back. I didn't know that until 2015 and when I went to the VI history class, and that's not a required course. So I started off there. I was like, this needs to be a required course to get a degree in the Virgin Islands because I had to take US government or US history to get my degree. So, these people are serious when it comes to indoctrination, and that's how you safeguard your culture. So
It's
your
about civics,
education. Mm-hmm.
that civic education, putting
Yeah.
it into schools. And I think, I mean, I don't want to speak for educators in the BVI, but I remember when I left teaching 15 years ago, 15
Mm-hmm.
years ago, and I see that the same concerns I had, the same desires I had. I remember returning and I was like, Columbus didn't discover, he
Mm-hmm.
didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Yeah.
distinctly remember resistance to my stance on that. Um, and I think for me, we know what we need to fix. We know how we need to make adjustments. The cries are there. It's the courage to do it, the
Yes.
determination, the leadership to make it happen. And And
Yeah.
the top down approach doesn't work. And
Mm-mm.
we've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars, like you've said, to bring consultants in. And I do agree that sometimes outside consultants is necessary, but I am a firm believer that if you educate your people, utilize your people.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know
We
um
we have the answers that we seek. We have the answers that we seek. And that for me I think is probably one of the biggest disappointments. So I always, whenever I have opportunity to point out something, it's like, yeah, this is one of us. This, we are capable of doing the things that maybe 30 years ago, yes, I did have to bring a consultant in, or I had to hire someone from someplace else to do this. But some things now are just fundamental, but we have to place the value, I think, in terms of, and not resist change, because I think that's probably one of the key things we're here talking about. It's not that we don't know, but there seems to be a resistance to change, and people fight to keep the status quo
that
because they,
comfort, that
yeah,
level of
the
comfort.
comfort zone. Yes, yes, yes,
And you
yes.
see that's also holding on to power. I've spoken with a lot of young people recently, early 20s, and I've said to them, economically, how do you feel about the BVI? It's easy to fill in a trade license, run to trade, get a trade license, and
Mm-hmm.
figure out something. But if the economy and the market and the community is not there to support you, your dream can die a quick death.
Yeah.
I would like to see, wealth in the BVI, new wealth being created instead of pumping wealth into the same families for generations and generations. A lot of persons leave the BVI because opportunities are abound throughout the world. And then
Yeah.
persons will get mad that we have a brain drain. People don't want to return. They can't get the salary they want. They can't get the opportunities they want. But those are valid points.
Mm-hmm.
When we see that, it's the same person over and over again, it's the same family over and over again benefiting in the BVI.
Yeah.
Like our government talks about new industries. Will these new industries be controlled by the same generation and the same persons and the same power players in our society again?
Mm-hmm.
Giving young people the opportunity to get into those industries and create new wealth that will then be in their families' generations and change lives, versus giving them the scraps at the table and telling them that they should be satisfied with that.
Yeah.
I spoke about communication earlier. I've ran into a lot of young people in the BVA. They don't know what avenues exist for them. They're not sure how to apply for a scholarship. They're not sure who they can go to get advice about doing this and about doing that. Can you imagine living in a society where maybe you don't have that many family members, or your family hasn't been exposed or educated to a certain level, and you have aspirations?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Who guides you? Who
Yeah.
directs you? How
Yeah.
available is information for you to make decisions that this is what you need to do? We
Yeah.
were not all on the same playing field when we came into the world, and as we grow, we'll not be the same way. But how are we making things more accessible for our young people, for their
Yes.
evolution and for their progress?
Yeah. That's the word right there. Access. That's the word right there. So you mentioned earlier, and you were talking about the Chamber of Commerce. I'm gonna touch on what we're doing, but I wanted to bring up my experience on the scholarship committee, because you and I have had some offline conversations, and I think uh, one of the conversations that we've had there in terms of suggesting ways, again, when we're talking about developing our young people. So we have the curriculum from preschool on up to high school, and then the college, they do
Mhm.
their thing. One of the things though that we would talk about often is, what are the priority areas? So like you're saying, where is the data that tells us, out of all the work permits that we give out, this amount is in engineering, this amount is in education, this amount is in health, this amount is in mechanics, carpentry, marine, you name it. And from there, have a career fair. Because again, if we don't connect our young people to what are the opportunities for you, after school, in terms of, you move on to your career path. So if these things aren't offered at the community college, then you're looking at going abroad, right?
Mhm.
So what is there for me to pursue in that regard? I mean, the other day, I think it was this week, I was celebrating the fact that I found out one of my younger cousins is studying marine engineering, because engineering for me, especially when I became an engineer, it's like I could probably count on my one hand the amount of females in engineering, and even then local engineers of both genders. because it wasn't something that I know in school. Anybody was telling me, go and study electrical engineering, go and study structural engineering, go and study civil engineering, because we got comfortable importing these skill sets rather than developing them, because we felt, office jobs with shirt and tie was the way to go. And then now we find out the plumber is making a lot more than some people in middle management. You
Mhm.
understand? So it's the narrative that has to definitely change in terms of and not well, the guidance counselors, I guess you would have to tell me. Guidance counselors, I think, is more about the psychosocial. What we need is career counselors. We need
Well,
a career center is what I'm thinking is necessary now.
I wouldn't knock the guidance counselors in our education system because I think they have evolved and they have been pointing and trying to make steps. Take, for example, the psychological effects of having a child dress up for career day.
Hmm.
We didn't have it when we were growing up. That instills in a child, this is what I want to be. You're dressing and you're projecting that profession. And I know the high school and other schools, private and public, they've done college fairs, they've done career fairs,
Hmm.
activities. So I think they're doing what they can. But again, Shayna, resources.
Yeah.
When you look at, high school, you have what? I think it's 800 children in the junior high, and I'm just saying off memory. I could be wrong.
Hmm.
One counselor for 200 children.
Hmm.
It's difficult. It's difficult,
Yeah.
for persons to get certain things done if they don't have the resources.
Yeah.
Um, to what you
And
were
I
saying,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you go ahead. Then I'll interject. Finish your thought.
So, to what you were saying, right, is for me, yes, you look at your job market, you look at your work permits, but you also look at the industries you want to create and you want to develop.
Hmm.
Our
Hmm.
government has thrown out talks of cannabis, medicinal marijuana, gambling. They've talked about agriculture. They've talked about the marine industry. Okay, so what are we doing?
Yeah.
How are we integrating? Not just at a tertiary level, because I
Hmm.
agree tertiary level is important, but there
Yeah.
are a lot of our citizens that or young people who will do high school and might do some professional development. But
Hmm.
when do you get a taste of that?
Yeah.
It goes back to our curriculum when we look at it. But on a national stage or setting, what are the expectations and where do we want to see this happen? I
Hmm.
look at fishermen and I say to myself, it's a trade that you're taught, but there's science to it. There's a
Yeah.
gentleman in Greenland. I admire that gentleman tremendously because his fishing is organized. It's a business. There's a science to it.
Yeah.
And there are other fishermen in the BVI who are exactly like that. Are we
Hmm.
promoting it?
Yeah.
Are we seeing and trying to divert or resources or youth into different career fields to try to take advantage of what it is we have in the BVI and that national strategy that we want to have that is free from political involvement?
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. And that there again is so key, because whatever is already existing, again, if we look at the metrics and saying, well, we're still importing all this labor in all these areas 10 years after we put programs in place, or let's say, for example, like a career fair, and really ramping it up to that place where, again, it's not just the traditional jobs, but like you're saying, expose them to the potential careers that they can go out and actually create businesses and create industry, because that is really where it has to start from. Somebody has to be the business owner to start that business that triggers a new industry. And as other people get into different aspects of the industry and own other businesses, they hire more people, and from there it goes forward, because and that, I think, in a nutshell, for everybody watching, that's what economic development is about.
It's
And that's
also
what
it's also
go
the
ahead.
competition, Shayna. And if I'm
Hmm.
a young person, 18, 19, 20 years old, and I want to start a construction firm or I want to start a business,
Yeah.
and there are persons in it who are established and they pull strings to make sure I don't get this done or
Yeah.
they do this to me. They're not encouraging me. And
Yeah.
that's the thing. Anyone who does something and wants to see our society grow, competition is healthy,
Yeah.
especially competition where young people come and they start businesses. But
Hmm.
I find, when I speak to a lot of young people, they're apprehensive about doing it because of competition or they've met barriers. People have pushed back against them.
Yeah, the discouragement that comes. Yeah.
There's no
And
mentorship in it. If there's an opportunity, I'm going to grab it before that young person grabs it. You don't have to take every opportunity that's
yeah.
in front of you if
Hmm.
you can help someone else or allow someone else to have that opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. So the mentorship, I guess that's another solution that's very key, because again, it's not that they are going to know everything,
Yeah.
even if they went to college and have many degrees, there's still certain things about business or even in their career that they need that extra coaching,
And
you
that
know,
guidance.
would help them to take it to that other level. Because I find it very saddening when you hear stories like that, in terms of saying, somebody wants to get into a particular business or they want to get into a certain industry, but established players basically block you rather
Yeah,
than saying, let me enter and you step up your game. Because again, if you think you have this unlocked, then you should be able to defend your turf and market share. I mean, that's how it works. That's what a free market is about. And I hear people a lot talk about, well, there's only so many businesses. Yeah, it's only so much businesses. But let the consumer decide. That's not your decision. Let
Shayna,
the
if you go in,
consumer be the one to say, well, I want to patronize this over this because of XYZ reason.
have
You
you
know?
have you ever been in a supermarket and you went to the freezer section to buy a drink? How many different choices are there? And if you go at
Exactly.
the beginning of the day and the end of the day, those choices are restocked
Mm-hmm.
because they must compete against Coca-Cola, they must compete against Grace, they
Apple
must
juice.
compete against. There is
Yeah.
enough there, and the consumer will choose. But
Yeah.
the monopoly on industries, a free market and capitalism is important in a society. But when
Yeah.
it's at the detriment of a younger generation succeeding,
Mm-hmm.
it no longer has that definition.
Yeah. And it's going to eventually die out, like you're saying,
Mhm.
or it creates a monopoly where only a certain people control it, and then prices start to have no kind of control. That the best price control is really the market,
Agreed.
because based on the competition, prices aren't going to just increase uncontrollably, because there are those that are going to maintain market value and say, no, this is worth $5 rather than 15. So the person selling at 15, again, if you have an awesome product and is at premium, then yeah, you will have people that may spend that.
It
But if
will.
market value is 5, then at least the people who can only afford $5 still have access to that product. And I think
I
that's the
agree
other
with you.
thing that people need to understand, that that's very key.
That
Okay, so I yeah, I think we had we put some very good solutions out there for that one. So we
so
really have to fix this ageism. Somebody just made a comment for us to or put a question to us. Are we truly interested in investing in our youth, or is it just saying that has been used to get them to vote? So I guess this is a good segue into the whole thing of engagement. Because again, if we're not teaching kids civics, I remember my mother explaining to me that they used to do civics in high school. Actually,
mhm,
not sure why it was taken out, but being learning to be a citizen really is very important. And it's not something I think should be, I guess, debatable. Because when you see people now come out and they're disrespectful to authority, they don't understand their constitution, they don't understand the laws of the land. There's a reason.
so
They have
I'll
not
say,
been educated.
I'll say this to you, Shane. I think our education in BVA was, well, we were obviously built on church-based education systems, right?
Hmm.
The
Yeah,
churches were responsible. Anglicans, the Methodists,
Methodist. Hmm.
started our education system. The debate of whether or not religious education should be in schools is one that I don't think the country is going to have, because I think the majority appreciates it. I think there'll be
Hmm.
some deviations and some suggestions as to how it should be done, which is
Hmm.
fine. But value education in terms of those underlying characteristics that allow a person to become a better citizen, those things must be placed in our curriculum. As educators, we say it's in our hidden curriculum, and sometimes it's so hidden it doesn't come out.
Mm.
um, in terms of civics and where we're going, let's take, for example, if we really were engaging young people, and I saw a question pop up there, if we really were engaging our young people and we were talking about moving forward and we're talking about constitutional change, here's a question: how do our young voters or young persons feel about the age of eligibility for voting in the BVI being reduced to 17 or 16? Jamaica did it, you know, and research has shown that people become more engaged at that age. We look at voter turnout in the BVI and we say to ourselves, Are the persons in that younger demographic, under 30, under 35, showing up? Why are they
Mm-hmm.
not showing up? Does our education system and our society prepare them to understand the importance of their voice? I will, and like I said, I like stories. When I was in school in St. Thomas, I traveled up to vote one election, and I stepped in to the polling station, and my presence was questioned by a candidate at the time. Now I've become great friends with that candidate, but I was overlooked until I got there and that person realized that
Your
my
voting
name
age.
meant that
Yeah.
I had the right
Mm-hmm.
to voice my opinion.
Yeah.
And that is a powerful thing, you know. And for me, I see, persons use young people during election. And I've said to a number of them over the years, if they're going to use your voice to convince people to vote for them, how are they investing in you? I'm not talking about a bush cutting contract. I'm not talking about paving a road. How are they investing in you? Do they see you in the next 5 years running, the next 10 years running BVI Electricity Corporation? Do they see you being the head of HR in government? Will they invest in you getting a graduate degree? Will they help you with a small business loan to get into tourism and take advantage of that blue economy? How are
Mm-hmm.
they how are they valuing you? Are they valuing you just to tell a story of how they took government public funds and invested in your education? It was in their
Yeah.
pocket. You should be grateful that they made a policy or a decision was made for you to get that education, but your education was paid for by the taxpayers in our society. And that's who you're obligated to if you choose to be obligated, not
Yeah.
to an individual.
Yeah.
So I saw the question and I'll say that for me, you know, youth for this person, youth behind this person, that's all nice, but at the end of the day, if you're only calling on young people when election is happening, then you're using them.
Yeah.
I'm very, very pleased to see young people in the BVI expressing their opinions on social media, and I encourage them to continue to express their opinions on life in the BVI, on things that they think need to be addressed. If that is the platform, and that is the platform for most young people in the BVI, do not be
Mm-hmm.
silenced by older heads who believe in conformity, who believe in going along and towing the line because their bread is buttered and they're being fed.
Mm-hmm.
There'll come a point where the decisions that are made by our present generation is going to affect this generation that's coming.
Yep.
I think your generation, my generation, we've seen the missteps of the generation before,
Before. Mm-hmm.
and that has put us in a very compromised position when it comes to quality of life.
Yeah.
And we owe the next generation the opportunity to do it. I think that if you're in a position of power and leadership, you have to make a decision when it's time for you to move on. If you've
Mm-hmm.
decided this is what you're going to do and you've
Yeah.
achieved it, move on. There's something about taking things to the next level. And when young people have your trust, you can't please them every day.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're screaming out to you that this is the problems that they have, don't brush them under the rug and tell them, you know, your adversity builds character and your adversity builds strength. Well, if your adversity has been for the majority of your life, how do you then as a leader help that young person?
Yeah. Yeah. And that is so, I think, key, again, going back to once we educate them from early, and even within families, because I know we would say some families are more politically minded than others. For example, I tell people my mother likes to speak politics more than me. But it is all about, for her, especially as a teacher, she would talk about, or she would hear me speak about something, and you need to say this and you need to say that, and this is why this is affecting people, because she would always break it back down to the grassroots. What's happening to the people, why they're making decisions in the House of Assembly, but at the end of the day, this is affecting people. It's not
Day
just
to day
something that goes
life,
on people. Yeah, it's
day to
not
day
something
life.
that does it doesn't just go on a paper and disappear someplace. You put things in place that are affecting people. And I think the pandemic was a good lesson in that day, because every time they sat down and made a decision every week, people are like, what in the wall? What in the wall, is going on, and who's coming up with these things? And some of it was because there was a lack of consultation, to be honest. Other things were, yeah, we didn't properly understand or have all the data, so things were adjusted where it needed to be. So that was good in terms of at least there was some level of responsiveness. But for me, I like to be proactive. So if there is somebody who can tell me, well, if I change this, how is it going to affect the marine industry? How is this going to affect small business? How is this going to affect teachers and students? And make sure we go through the multiple scenarios and say, okay, it's not a cookie cutter thing. And from in one of the specific issues that we were encountering with the Chamber of Commerce and a lot of that stuff was, Anegada is not just Van Dyke, it's not Virgin Gorda, it's not Tortola. So when you think about business in the Virgin Islands, they are not all the same.
There is no one
And
size fits all.
yeah, and they've for lack of a different word, or to be polite, which I don't think I should be about it, it was disrespectful. That's how they felt. It's like, one, you don't care enough to ask us what we need first.
Mm-hmm.
And then second of all, when we do contribute and say, hey, this isn't gonna work for us, we're gonna suffer basically under certain policies or decisions that were made, and we think things need to be adjusted, and it's like you're ignored. So that's disrespect on top of disrespect. And that was something where we try to make the message very clear. It's like we can't do that. So whether it was in a crisis situation or even on a regular basis,
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing and hearing it all the time. Virgin Gorda would say, well, why don't we have these things in over here? We always have to come to the main island. And I think we've evolved enough as a community to say that we need to devolve things, just like how we devolve the post office into all the districts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as simple as that sounds, you need to take it to another level and say, on the different islands, certain things need to be just basic for them, and
I
as
think
in
it's
not.
who feels it knows it, Shayna. Let's be real.
Hmm.
It's who feels it knows it. If
Yeah.
your daily life is not affected by it, I can hem and haw, I can scream, I can shout. If you're not affected by it, it's not an issue. I know years ago we talked about trying to reverse that economic drain of people going to the U.S. Virgin Islands and
Hmm.
spending money. I think the pandemic did that. But how many of us go to Virgin Gorda to spend money and put in or sister islands? Do we think about it that way? Yes, we have our staycations and other things, but I want to go
Yeah.
back to what you were talking about during the pandemic and the lockdowns and how decisions were made. I felt the lockdowns gave us an opportunity as a country. I had hoped that the civil service, and maybe they didn't do it, I might not know, that they would sit and look at legislation, these ancient legislations that we have. That, if you go into social development, that our child protection laws needed to be assessed and evaluated. We know that in education, as I spoke about, there were things that needed to be looked at. I'm sure in our, criminal justice systems, or finance systems, there are laws, there are acts that needed to be adjusted. And
Hmm.
a simple conversation with some of our civil servants who have been through a lot of this, who could tell you these are things that need to be done. Why
Hmm.
won't we push in legislation then? Why
Yeah.
won't we not meeting virtually and slamming home those policies that would help improve things that are outdated?
Yeah. Yeah. We need to move that bar forward. That's really big. All right, we have another comment. We'll check that out, and then we'll segue into what is needed. That was one of the points that you had, talking about the legal and social frameworks that are needed to support and protect our youths. If elections are treated like pageantry, then the cycle of devaluation of young, naive, or inadequately educated voters will continue. Education should be used to develop and empower citizens rather than oppress, disengage, or leaving them feeling distressed. And yes, she sounds like she's definitely supporting what we said. We have to break the cycle that's being used in terms of, you only know young people when it is, it's campaign season.
But Shayna, that's actually, for me, when you look at life in any country, I think our leaders should be planning from birth to death.
Hmm.
We
Hmm.
should be looking at the transitions. When I look at our political leaders that we have, are they planning for when they get older? There was a lot of talk about the insurance packages that they get. There was talk about increased in salaries, pensions, those things. And I understand the significance of those. But Are you improving the life and the quality of our senior citizens so
Mm-hmm.
that when you're in their position, you'll be able to reap those benefits? Do we
Yeah.
think like that? You
Yeah.
know, and then when you look at it, my grandmother used to sell her vote for a dressing table. People may sell their vote for a fridge. And when you're oppressed to the point that you think that's all that your value is,
Mm-hmm.
a person, let's be frank, I think it was recently said by the leader of the opposition, someone in government may make 85, $95,000 while they're in there, including their benefits. A
Mm-hmm.
dressing table is what, $500? A
Mm-hmm.
fridge is what, $900? You're giving them your vote, which accumulates into them being able to collect 85 times four is what, a $500,000
Yeah.
for a fridge.
Yeah.
We have to value what we have, and we have to understand what that is.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to vote because we don't like someone, we won't vote for them. The
Yeah.
question is, will they impact your life? And I think also we tend to look at, you know, we don't think that if life is good for one segment of the society, it's fine. But there are other segments that need to do and do
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
I often tell parents your child may like a boy or a girl who might become your in law. You need to make sure that that child has the best opportunity so that your child doesn't suffer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It has, again, it goes back to that nationalistic view that you're looking straight across the board. So whether it's families that are low income, where we talked about, that might be where they start. But do we want them to stay there? Or are we going to give them access to business opportunity, access to career opportunities so that they can better themselves? And then their children are even better off.
Give them
So
little more access.
granny might have started off as a maid in a hotel,
Hmm.
and she worked 2 3 jobs to make sure she got her kids through. But we have to know, in terms of from a societal standpoint, make sure that policies are being made, things are in place, both in the private and the public sector, that enable people to say, hey, if I want to make something of myself, I can do it. If people don't want to, hey, we can't force them.
But there's a
But
pathway. There is a
yeah.
pathway to
Yeah.
success. And it's
Yeah.
not a vague pathway. It's not a pathway that is only for the elites. It's
Hmm.
not hidden. The access
Yeah.
is there, the assistance is there, and it's clearer.
Yeah. Yeah, it has to be. It has to be. So social legal frameworks. What are your thoughts there? What do we need? I know
I
you
think
touched, you were talking about some of the things that are outdated, but I don't know if you have any specifics in mind in some of the things that need to be addressed.
for me right now, I think and it piggybacks on what I said. You know, I think the older generation, we tend to say that young people are rude, they're
Hmm.
disrespectful. I've been coined that at different points in my life already, both, publicly and privately. Young people, I think, are they're not their expression and the way in which they express themselves is different, and we
Hmm.
must respect that. I think sometimes we as an older generation, even a generation older than us, we chastise young people for speaking up, for standing up. And I
Hmm.
had an interesting conversation with someone yesterday and today where they spoke about Virgin Islanders and Caribbean on the people on the whole who fought. We like to talk about our heritage and oppression, but we also have to understand that young people have a voice and they need to be allowed to express it.
Hmm.
Killing their voice or discouraging their voice is not going to help our society grow. It's not
Yeah.
going to help them as an individual to grow. Now, I'm not saying that using inappropriate language is something that should be encouraged, but
Yeah.
at the same time, allow people to express themselves.
Hmm.
Respect is earned, right? And in a society, differing opinions will happen.
Yeah.
More engagement for our young people to express themselves. We have a youth parliament. I was so pleased when I heard them speak. I'm eager to hear them speak again. I had an interaction with them some
Yeah.
time back. I would like to
Yeah.
hear them weigh in on some of the issues that we have right now that the population is concerned about.
Yeah.
I prefer to see them being a voice of young people and not, you know, in my opinion, young people who are just, like the comment was, pageantry. You're
Yeah.
parading across the stage. Look at me.
Hmm.
I think celebrating the success stories in our society in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
What did this young person do? What is their backstory? Instead of celebrating them on Facebook, let's celebrate them nationally. Let's take on some of these billboards that we have for vaccination. Let's put up some of our, or local persons who have done well. Let's talk about these stories.
Yeah.
Let's get into our schools and, let's say, for example, go to one of the schools in a district. Do you have persons in your district who have done well? Inspire our
Yeah.
young people to want
Yeah.
to be. Inspire that child who doesn't believe they can succeed. But when they see
Achieve.
a
Yeah.
man who grew up right next to them in a house next to them, and they realize that, I was pondering the other day that when I was in primary school, my teachers knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. When I was in high
Mm-hmm.
school, my teachers knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. And some of them I would encounter be like, well, Stacy, you didn't become the doctor. You didn't become the marine biologist. You became a teacher, and now you're all kind of different things. But how many people in our society know what it is your neighbor's children or your nieces or your nephews want to be when they grow up, and how are you helping them? How
Mm-hmm.
many of our leaders know what the children in their district want to be when they grow up, and how are they actually helping them? And when I say leaders, I don't mean just political, church
Yeah.
leaders.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who's older that has the capacity to do it.
Yeah.
How are you ensuring that the quality of life for the next generation is maintained? I
Yes.
remember, I remember when, God rest his soul, Cyril B. Romney, someone went into his home and attacked him, and people thought that it was complete outrage, which it was.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, that was a telling point for us as a society,
Yeah.
where someone of status in the community, they went into his home and they did something that didn't make it right. But where is the disconnect? And
Mm-hmm.
when we have crimes in the BVI, especially violent crimes, we're outraged. But how are we preventing that?
Yeah.
We have scooter riders in our society, Shayna, and we jump up and down about them. But where is driver education and safety in schools?
Yeah.
How can
Yep.
we expect someone to know what to do when
Mm-hmm.
we who are those that guide them are not putting those things in place?
Yeah.
And we have to start thinking about where we're at, where we're going, and stop using our young people socially for posters.
Yeah.
We have to engage them, we have to buy in and give them value.
Yeah.
And legally, we need to look at adjusting laws that allow for wealth growth among young people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big supporter of financial literacy in schools, assisting our young people in understanding what to invest in, what to do. Not
Mm-hmm.
all of our young people have mothers and fathers who are able to guide them because maybe someone in their life didn't guide them. So
Mm-hmm.
that's a generation failing another generation. And there's no pointing fingers at that,
Yeah.
but
You need
stepping in
something to fill that gap.
bridge that
Yes.
gap. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So you have to bridge the gap. And I think that's one of the key things because, what I'm hearing in my mind is, the importance of organizations like Scouts, organizations like the Girl Guides. And I would tell anybody if I learned, the first place I learned about leadership would have
Hmm.
been in the guides. Because as a Brownie, you were part of six, what we call, and then you had you as again the young person, you would become the leader of that six, and then above you. So we learned about authority from
Hmm.
that age. So we I know sometimes parents takes for granted with kids in terms of their interest level in certain things, but sometimes you have to expose them. Later on, they may become interested because then they actually understand what something is about. But in terms of teaching them life skills, those community organizations, the Girls and the Boys Brigade, all of these are things that are very important. Again, like you're saying, if the family background is not as solid as we would want it to be, these are the things that bridge the gap in our community. And then there are those things that, again, the public service. So everything isn't, we're not saying everything is for government to do. We definitely, as a community, have to get back to that place of the village raising the child,
Yeah, I
and
mean,
and and seeing where we can step into the gap for some of these things, whether it's through mentoring or encouraging them, getting involved in sports teaches discipline, and again being part of a team so that when you go on a job you don't act all crazy because you don't understand, what is this change in environment for you because you haven't learned your personal skills, your interpersonal skills are not as developed as they need to be.
I think that expectations from more people in our community for our young people to behave a certain way, to
Mm-hmm.
succeed, to be able to walk up to one of them and say, "I'm proud of you." You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, Again, it comes down to taking a hard look at what we
Yeah.
have and where we want to go,
Yeah.
and actually having a plan to do that versus, haphazardly trying to figure out and react.
Hmm. Yeah. And it goes right back to that youth policy we started off talking about it.
It
Because
does,
again, when we sit down and we look at that and say, okay, when it comes to economics, what do we want to see for them? When it comes to health, what do we want to see for them? When it comes to education, what do we want to see? And understand all this stuff is integrated.
but
Because
it has
again,
to
if
it
they
has to
don't,
come off of the paper, Shayna. It has
yes,
been on the paper.
yes,
The problem
yeah,
is we can always have a document and say, well, other Caribbean countries do not have a youth policy, or other Caribbean countries do not have a program like what we have. But
yeah,
it has to come off the paper, and it must be alive.
yeah,
And it can't
yeah.
be.
Because we can't say we have it if it's not realized.
No, and then the testimonies that come from those things, you
Hmm.
maybe might have, let's say, 10,000 youth in the BVI. I'm just picking a number here,
Yeah,
and you have 5 stories.
yeah, yeah.
That's not equitable. When you spoke about brownies and Girl Guides and Cub Scouts, if we talk about youth development, those things were free. When you look at
Mhm.
most of the youth programs in the BVI now, after school programs, summer programs, there is a price
Yeah,
attached to it.
cost. Hmm.
How did we
Yeah,
get there?
yeah,
How did we get to the point where opportunities for young people in the BVI are completely tied to finance? Is
yeah,
totally being you have to pay in order to get that experience.
yeah. And that again goes back to you start to eliminate access for some of the at-risk youth that we
Mhm.
that need to be in some of these programs, because we never talk about that. I don't know if you've ever heard it, but when we hear our leaders speak, do you ever hear them talk about at-risk youth? Because it seems as if everybody's on the same level and everybody is good.
That
And
equity is not
that
there.
does not
It's not
exist.
there. No, it does not.
No, it does not
It does not.
exist. It does
It
not
does not.
exist.
No.
And it only takes, again, as an example, looking at the school system where you have A students, you have B students, you have C students, you have D students, and then you have those that completely drop out the system.
Hmm.
So that lets you know that we don't have the level of equity that we would like to see, or where certain things are, and that's a key thing that needs to happen. So, well, Stacey, I think we put a lot of food for thought out there tonight. As far as where we need to be at in terms of educating and equipping our youth for life. One of the things I when I was thinking about the show and what it is, we want to make sure we give some takeaways for people to go back with and really start to think about, whether as a parent, as an educator like yourself, as a business person, as a public officer, what is our role in making sure that our youth are equipped, they are equipped for success, because it's not going to happen, like we said, haphazardly. It's not going to happen by chance. There are some things that can be done, and if we really acknowledge and view them as the national assets. A lot of times we talk about we don't have resources. Yeah, I beg to differ. We're loaded. And
Hmm.
again, it's coming at us all the time. People are being born every day, and they're there to be taken care of. And we have to say, well, we are going to invest in them so that we can get a return on them. Again, when they hit 25, they start to contribute back to the
Agree.
next set that's coming behind on them. And that those of us, again, we stand in place to hand off the baton and to coach them along, and to get them to that next stage of you become the coach after they pass it on. Otherwise than that, there's so much tension, around generations in our society, and I think we become too comfortable with it. We figure, well, that's just part of a culture. Well, no. There are certain things that we just have to say we can be better at, or we can do better, and that is what we truly need to start to focus on. So we're gonna continue to be watchful, my friend, around this. Definitely, we're gonna get our hands on the youth policy and probably come back and kind of unpack that also and educate the viewers on what exactly did the youth policy say, and again, looking at it for another 5-10 years, what does it need to say going forward, and how we continue to engage our young people and make that difference. you know So thank you for being here. This is your first time, but definitely won't be your last.
Appreciate.
Uh, Words of encouragement. So here's what I found, because I always like to leave people with something to build them up. And I was very surprised that Franklin D. Roosevelt said this. I don't know what the scenario was, but I have to go research it. But this is what he said: we cannot always build the future for our youth, but we can build our youth for the future. Okay.
Agreed.
So again, they are our national asset, and we need to, again, from birth to 25, we need to make sure that they are we are investing in them, we are pouring into them, we're safeguarding them. I mean, some of the things we didn't touch on, but when we talk about child abuse, child neglect, again, these are things that we should never get comfortable with in our
No,
society,
no.
because it will breed up more social ills
And
later
accept.
on the line.
Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah. So that sure is key. So I appreciate you sharing your experience. And okay, I think I just dropped off.
Hmm.
Oh goodness. Okay, we just dropped out. Thank you. Thank you to all those who tuned in. And again, if you are new to our show, like our Facebook page, The Vigilante Dialogue, subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Vigilante Dialogue. All our past episodes are on there. We've been around for about 10 years, and we haven't uploaded everything as yet, but hopefully we're gonna continue to get those up so that you guys can get up to speed with the national conversations that we have been having. So thank you for those who tuned in on Facebook or YouTube, and definitely share this link with your friends and family and encourage them to be a part of the conversation for a better Virgin Islands. Good evening.